Support our friends at the Tampa Bay Times, tampabay.com. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
Good. Appreciate the plug there, Jay. It was very, very nice sentiments you expressed there, and we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, man. And it's just, as a guy like me, people say, man, you learned how to read at such an early age. And I go, yeah, for me, that's how I learned how to read. When I was a kid, I opened up and I read every single box score there was in the mid to late 80s. And it's just every single team. And my dad, I think my dad used to like show me off, like, tell him what the Astros lineup is, and Billy Hatcher, and you know what I mean? Like all these different, tell him what the Mets and the Yankees lineup were. But that's my thing, man. Always reading the newspaper every single morning, cover to cover. And, it's a changing world, isn't it, Mark, to be able to go like on the digital side. And I know like it's not just on deadline. I know there is deadlines, but it's completely different how you disseminate your information now.
Yeah. I mean, it truly evolved, I mean, I've obviously been doing it for 28 seasons. So I don't remember which year it was, but it evolved from news gathering and then writing, and news gathering, reporting, writing. It's all one now. It's just a matter of get it out as quickly as you can, then add to it. You're on call 24/7. Their news cycle is 24/7. I mean, yesterday I got word of the Rays sale and got the scoop on that, and it was literally in my head like, okay, I had the story kind of worked up because I knew it was coming soon. And do I finish that story first and we get that posted, or do I just put something on social media first? Because there's kind of that race for who has it, and can I kind of do both? And I'm not that coordinated. I only had one keyboard, so I couldn't quite I needed a second keyboard there, I guess. But we got it done. We got it out. We got it on social media saying we had the story on our website, which was up in the next few minutes. So I think we kind of fed both monsters there. But yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, what constitutes a story? What constitutes just a tweet? Then you're competing with people who don't write stories that are just tweeting stuff. And obviously, that's just from the kind of print side of it. Obviously, people who have their own blogs and things, there's a different version than, people on podcasts, people on radio shows. There's just so many people out there. Everyone's kind of competing for the same thing. Like you were saying before, you'd like to think that, the sophisticated readers, kind of know where to go for what they're looking for and know who to trust. And, especially on topics of controversy or things like that. And, obviously, promoting our paper, having seasoned reporters such as Ed and Rick and John and myself, really helps us. And Joey Knight on the college side really helps us, I think, with our credibility and our ability to report things and sift through what's important and what isn't.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that too, because the more that the podcast landscape is coming and everything, like people say, I've had this conversation with people like journalistic integrity. That was a huge thing that I knew coming into radio 11, 12 years ago. It was like, all right, well, this is important. But now it's so different because you're bringing all these different mediums, but they didn't get a journalistic degree. They didn't get a journalism degree. So it's a little bit of the wild, wild west. But I want to ask you, as far as, because you are the number one source for Tampa Bay Rays news on the planet. And this kind of goes into the conversation a couple of weeks ago about the AP voter that didn't have USF in the top 25. And I came on the show the next day and I said, listen, it's one thing if you made a mistake, that's fine. But to act like it's not a big deal, I know how important Hall of Fame votes are, and people pour through that and they want to make sure it's the right thing. And they take such ownership of that. And to have young writers just act like it's not, it'll work itself out. Like, I just feel like it's a disservice, like to somebody like yourself that really makes sure that, hey, I am putting all of my information behind this. I studied this. I try to give an educated, opinion when I have a decision to make like that. But as far as you and putting that, on your brain, like, how important is that for you to make sure that, like, your voice means something? Tom Jones gave me the earful years ago. He goes, Jay, you're one of these people that, like, your opinion does matter. Like, don't limit yourself. And it's one thing to be humble, but be cognizant of the things that you say, because it does matter to you, or it does matter to people. How important is that to you, Mark, knowing that, like, what you put out there, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's on TampaBay.com or in the newspaper, like, it means something to people?
I mean, I think, that's got to be pretty much the most important thing, right? Your credibility. Right. And I'm not the funniest person to begin with, but
Come on.
I've been careful to kind of cut back on throwing even jokes out there or, borderline sarcasm, just because people interpret things in so many different ways and levels of sensitivity to a certain point, but you don't want to harm your own credibility either, right? And we've seen people who literally have sabotaged their own careers with a flippant tweet or a flippant comment on a radio show or a TV interview. And I think that has to be important. And as far as like the voting, and I think you were alluding to, it was a young reporter, and I think she eventually came out and said her reasoning was they'd get in there eventually or something. But it's a privilege to vote for things like this. And you have to be in the Baseball Writers Association for 10 years before you even get a Hall of Fame vote. So 10 years of doing that job, and that's, people should take it seriously. You earned the right to do that. And if you screw that up, kind of shame on you. And I know Adam Berry was talking about the other day, he'll be voting, I think, for the Hall of Fame for the first time this year. And I thought he'd been doing it for 10 years already, because I feel like I've known him for 20 years. And but yeah, there's a certain thing that comes with these opportunities, and you damn well better take it seriously and realize, as you say, you've earned this platform, whatever it is, but you've earned your platform, and you have to be responsible in what you do. And that's why sometimes you change your dinner plans and you drop what you're doing and you turn the car around to go write a story or put something out or update something, because you've kind of built a tradition or a legacy of being right and being, accurate and wanting to make sure people understand and get the information out there. And that's why you kind of do it still.
Speaking of legacy, I guess we're coming to the end of the Stu Sternberg tenure here with the Rays. it's still a way. Some people are like, is this really going to happen now? And we've gotten burned how many times, right? To know, like, all right, this could be the end of the story. But just your whole take. I know you put out the story yesterday. I told everybody, start pronouncing and spelling Zalupski. Get ready to roll. But just take us through like yesterday and just kind of where we are as far as like the final transition from Stu Sternberg to this new ownership group.
By the way, that was a pro segue from the legacy thing. That was, you should be in radio.
I won. Yeah, it's a good thing. Maybe I'll try it one day.
Throw it out there for you, buddy. Yeah, look, I think we are at the end of Stu Sternberg's tenure, and it was what I'm not even going to get into whether people should like him or not like him, and obviously there's some pretty hard cast opinions out there. I'll keep my own to myself, but I do have a piece in tomorrow's paper talking to some pretty key people from Rays past and what they think. Evan Longoria, Joe Madden, a couple people like that, and I think you'll find that interesting, and that'll post later today. But we are at the end. That was a very emotional moment for Sternberg the other night when they surprised him during the game Saturday. The players and staff came out of the dugout, tipped their hat. All the employees filed through. They had this all orchestrated. The hat tip with the custom hat with two of his kind of favorite things, one on each side, the silhouette of Sandy Koufax, his favorite player, but the other one was much more symbolic, the broken window. And that's one of his phrases that he kind of, his management philosophies is, it's okay to break some windows, just don't burn down the whole house. And then that's kind of how he empowers his employees. That's one of the things, I'm sure you've talked to people who work there, and look, not everyone's happy, not everyone loves their boss. That's going to happen in every workplace, but you talk to people who work there for a long time and do like working there, and that's kind of what comes to the surface, is the way he empowers people to do their job. And he'll question, he'll ask, but ultimately, if your job is to be the widget maker, he lets you make the widgets. And I think that's part of his legacy. I think you have to look at the wins, right? Third most wins since '08. So you have to asterisk out the first 2 years as they were kind of getting their footing there. But since '08, third most regular season wins in the majors, behind the Yankees and the Dodgers, I think it is. The Cardinals are like right behind the Rays, 1 or 2 games behind them. 9 postseason appearances in 16 years. Did they win the big one? No, they did not. And that was actually, I'll give you a little preview. That was one of the points Longoria raised in the article I'm writing, where he said, if you win one World Series, the perception of him might be totally different, because then you won the big one once. But I think if your job, if you own a team and the ultimate goal for the team is to win games, and you're the owner and the team wins a lot of games, I think that's a successful tenure. Now, there's obviously other factors. Didn't get a stadium built, was criticized for everything from where he lived to things like that. And that he didn't care about winning. I mean, I've been around enough games after games where I've seen him come in and out of the locker room. He cares about winning. He enjoys the victories, and he did not enjoy the defeat. So, it's not going to be perceived this way universally, but I think there's a lot of people who will tell you that, the Stu Sternberg era will be looked back upon in history very kindly for what he did for this franchise. And 2J, you've been around. Don't forget the context of where this team was under the initial owner, Vince Naimoli, who, again, deserves credit for getting the team here. But, those first 10 seasons, they were in last place, 9 of them. The one they weren't, they won 70. That would be 70 total games. And Lou Piniella, a man who thought every season you should go 162-0, did a toast with a straight face in the clubhouse with Don Zimmer going, "What are you doing?" to acknowledge winning 70 games just because that was progress from where they've been. So to go from that group and then, transition through 06 and 07, figuring out what they were doing with Friedman and Silverman calling the shots and Madden managing and all that, and then start that run in 08 and, keep it going really, a couple lap years, and then under Cash, obviously the 5 straight years of making the playoffs. And, that kind of all feeds into why this is an interesting and somewhat critical juncture for the new owners, because there's no new stadium. They're hoping the Trop is fixed, but that's not a sure thing either. So they're going to have some flexibility for a plan B if something happens there. And they're coming off back-to-back seasons now and missing the playoffs, and baseball economics may be changing yet again. So there's going to be a lot of things. This new ownership group isn't, plug and play or just take the keys and drive the car down the road. There's going to be a lot of things they're going to have to get immediately involved in.
Yeah, you mentioned the complicated legacy of Stu. I think what happens in the next ownership will also have to do with Stu, because there'll be a backside comparison as well as a front side as well.
If they lose for 10 years in a row, Stu's going to be the greatest owner in the history of owners.
Maybe Stu wasn't that bad, but you're right. And I read the article by John Romano and the employees, and, me being back coaching again, there's just like, it's a totally different side. And I kind of compared it to a restaurant. Like a head chef, his sous chefs could love him. The waiters could love him. But, even if you put good food on the table, but the experience isn't great, like some people may not come back to your restaurant. So, it's kind of like, it's very complicated. I think it's such a layered conversation. I don't know if we'll ever get, a resolute one side or the other where people loved it or hated it. I think there's just always going to be shades of gray. But
I don't agree. I don't, just interrupt you for a second. There is no right answer, because some people will hate Stu and how he ran the team, and some people will love Stu and how he ran the team, and some people are going to be both, and some people's opinion will be shaped by the context of what happened before and what happened, history, the past precedent, and what happens in the future. So, I mean, they'll be, when the Bucks are celebrating 50 years now, the Rays are at 28. When that 50-year book is written by the next round of Tampa Bay Times sports writers, it'll be interesting to see what context they put that in. Hopefully somebody will read it to me.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. Yeah, you never know. It'll be in multiple languages. Those kind of, it might not even be a book. It might just be
Probably
like a hologram or something.
You just blink your eyes and it shows up in front of your head.
Exactly. So one of the things that I was able to glean from the article that you wrote about this whole thing was there could be another short-term lease for Tropicana Field after 2028. We know that it was extended for a year because of obviously what happened this year and playing at Steinbrenner Field. But I think that's one of the big things that Rays fans need to be realistic about. Is it's not like the payroll is going to be $200 million next year. These guys already have a plan in place for a stadium. Like I don't know if people are going to really see that much of a difference next year, other than that they're going to be playing in Tropicana Field again. Right, Mark? Like, what are some of the big dominoes that really have to fall when it comes to the new ownership group as far as like progress? Because as much as people want to blame Stu, like people don't wonder where the Glazers are during the Buccaneers game days. They don't care if they're in England or in New York or whatever. Like they care out on the field. People are like, oh, Stu's in New York. Who cares? If the Rays are winning, you're not going to give a crap or two. If the Rays struggle next year and we don't get any news on the stadium, you're not going to feel better because it's somebody else than Stu. Like, what are the next dominoes that need to fall? What are some of the questions that need to be answered once the Lupski and crew kind of get in there?
Yeah, I mean, we're assuming they're going to have some type of media conference, next week or the week after, and kind of share these plans. And, not to disagree with you, I personally think you're right, but maybe they are going to surprise everybody. Maybe they are going to
I'll take
announce.
it.
They are going to announce they have a stadium agreement, and it would
Nice.
have been the greatest kept secret in the history of secrets around Tampa Bay. Or,
Mhm.
yeah, they would. This would not be Ray's type of strategy, but yeah, we're going to double our payroll next year and have every agent in the game like speed dialing them. Oh, if you're doubling your payroll, sign my
Mhm.
guy, sign my guy.
Mhm.
But yeah, maybe there is a surprise there, but I would think right. Probably more likely is, you see a similar type arrangement, a transitional type of year. But yeah, you want to make friends and influence people. Go sign a big name free agent, something the Rays haven't done. Go build some depth, have some type of stadium agreement. Or yeah, remember Stu Sternberg took over? Wasn't it like free parking for the first year if you had more than
Mhm.
4 people in a car? Lower beer prices. That's a pretty simple way to get
Yeah.
people to be happy. So, yeah, we'll see what they have planned. I mean, everything we've heard is these are very smart people. It's an interesting mix, a lot of different backgrounds from the 6 or 7 names that we have. We don't have them all. We were told that there's prominent Tampa Bay investors. Really, only 2 locals in the group: Dan Doyle and Fred Ridley so far. So we'll see if there are indeed other locals and who they are and of what consequence and influence they have. But I mean, just curious to see. You only get one chance to make a first impression, right? And Romano and I were talking about this the other day. When the Sternberg group took over, they did it right. They rented like the ballroom at the Vinoy. They did
Mhm.
like one-on-ones with each media outlet. They were not in a hurry to get done. They answered, I think, kind of remember thinking we were kind of at the front end of the first round of interviews and at the back end of the one-on-ones, and we were there 2-3 hours after, but everybody got everything they needed. And have some good news to share and answer all the questions would be two of the good ways for them to start. But they want to make that good first impression, so I'll be very curious to see how this rolls out whenever it is.
Mark, what's the kind of the biggest bullet points when you look back at this season? Obviously, a little underwhelming there, and you had that really nice run in the middle of the season. You're like, wow, this team is really kicking, and they just couldn't really kick back on. When you look back at the season, I know there's a week left. What are some of the things that are going to stand out to you, and what do you think is probably the biggest thing that they need to rectify to get back to being competitive in the AL East?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things you can point to why they didn't play better. I do think there was some, Steinbrenner Field influence there, just to, not having any certainty, not knowing what they were going to get, some frustration, early on when they were hitting balls they thought were going to go out, weren't going out. Everybody, including myself and probably you and others, all wrote and talked about this place, the launching pad. I remember when the Pirates came in right early on, Derek Shelton had managed the Tampa Yankees, 10 years
Mm-hmm.
earlier, but he said it's going to be like an airport, jets taking off every inning, and it wasn't like that, and that
Mm-hmm.
was kind of surprising. And so I think that there was some Steinbrenner Field influence. Obviously, some key injuries, not having McClanahan all year, losing Aranda at the All-Star, not the All-Star break, at the trade deadline, losing him as good as he was going. I mean, just put Aranda back in that lineup with what Junior Caminero did, with what Yandy Diaz has done, with what Brandon Lau has done. And, you see how that changes with what Chandler Simpson and or Jake
Mm-hmm.
Mangum have done. I mean, there's 4, 5, 6 impact players right there. And, when you take Aranda out of that, you start noticeable impact. And then the bullpen, obviously, there was that stretch where I think in about a 15 or 17 game stretch, there were 10 losses, and they all were bullpen related in some fashion, either
Mm-hmm.
a directly blown save or a blown lead, and then they were surpassed later in the game. So bullpen hurt them, injuries hurt them, Steinbrenner Field hurt them, and just the inconsistency. I mean, that 25-9 run, they looked like the best team in baseball at that point. I think Fangraphs had them at 78% chance to make the playoffs, and then they flipped it in worse. They were 9-24, and they won a couple games, and then it ended up being like 12-40 or something. They just had
Mm-hmm.
this horrendous stretch, and so the inconsistency. And obviously, the way they're going now, they're finishing the season out with a bunch of young players in there getting some playing time. Maybe that helps. They've got some decisions to make. Brandon Lau has an option for next year. Pete Fairbanks has an option for next year. Adrian Hauser's a free agent. And then there's a bunch of guys headed to arbitration that weren't. I think the only two actual signed players for next year are Rasmussen and Diaz.
Wow, geez. So you're going to be on the horn again, looking at all these arbitration numbers, waiting to hear when these hearings are. It never ends. Last one for me, because I said this as soon as the day they traded for him. I feel like a guy like Griffin Jacks could be a candidate, that next guy to go from bullpen to the starting rotation. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I talked to him about it whenever we were in Chicago, so a week and a half ago or so, and he's definitely up for it. He's open to it. He was a starter coming up. He said he's expecting to have a conversation with them after the season, and it's probably a little tricky because they got to figure out, of these guys that they kind of handled carefully down the stretch, make sure everybody's good, and what are they good for next year? Pepe Obaz and Rasmussen. And what's McClanahan? What's his status? I mean, he hasn't pitched now since August of 23. And we know how good he can be when healthy, but is he still that guy if and when he gets back out there?
Unbelievable job as always, Marc Topkin, Tampa Bay Times, TB Times _Rays. He's only making jokes with me here, and of course with Ronnie and T-Crass. Those the mimosa Mark that they call him. TampaBay.com/sports. I read it every day. You guys should support local. I can't say it enough, especially down the stretch here in the regular season. If something big has happened, and Marc Topkin and John Romano and the whole crew are all over it. Mark, thanks for making my show a whole hell of a lot better whenever you're on it, my friend. Enjoy the last week of the season. We'll talk soon.
All right, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
You got it, pal. Marc